Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Are your business expenses playing hide and seek? With Uber for Business, the small spends that slip through the cracks, like rides and meals, go right where you need them. Because it integrates with leading expense platforms, you can say goodbye to surprise costs, missing dollars, or chasing receipts. Everything's track downable. Uber for Business. Make small steps that make a big impact. Learn more at uber.com/small steps.
Got some good news for your ears. More of that good stuff is coming up. And even better news for your hair. The best hair care is at Sephora. They've got all kinds of products for every kind of hair. From brands like Amika, Kerastase, Day, and K18. You knew where to get great audio. Now, you know where to get great hair care, too. Sephora. Good news for great hair. Shop hair care now at Sephora.com.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Several people, Kieran, have asked if I could try and keep a straight face at the start of this pod, Kieran. I'm the host of what we try to sell to the world as a serious and sensible, in-depth examination of the money behind the beautiful game, as we like to say. But it's impossible to keep a straight face when Maguire's doing Thunderbird 4 impressions. I think he was the pilot of Thunderbird 4. How are you, Kieran? It seems like we spent so much time together last week, virtually, and actually the week before that. It seems like I haven't seen you for ages, but Ali reckons it's been 2 days.
Yeah, I had a really good weekend. Just by keeping... Didn't have the television on once, and...
What?
Just pottered about and managed to escape, went out on my bike and saw a bit more of the world.
Well, see, that baffles me. We used to recall it's the electronic babysitter. That's what we used to call the telly in my house. As an only child, if the TV is not on or the radio is not on, I simply can't function. I have to have noise. I had the golf on for 4 days. That's fantastic. Just also, it's not. I can't play golf. It's like a couple of days off, isn't it? Really, it's like having a little weekend break in Northern Ireland. Just go. Looks lovely, and it was raining, so I was really jealous. All that thunder and lightning we were promised in the south didn't materialise. Although I noticed Finley looked soaking wet in one of the photographs you sent him.
Yes.
And you say, what a happy little dog. He didn't look like a happy little dog. he looked like a dog who was putting that on the list of bad things that Daddy had done to him. Yeah, it's questions day, Kieran.
It is.
We've got some cracking questions, as usual. So let's get stuck into them. Tom Joseph, that's our first question. Tom says, do managers have a registration that other clubs have to pay to acquire while under contract like players do? If not, then why does a club looking for a new manager pay compensation to release them? Couldn't the manager in question simply resign voluntarily and pocket more of a signing-on fee or wages if his new club didn't have to pay compensation? Now, the trouble with that question, Kieran, it's a very interesting question, but unfortunately, technically, no one's allowed to talk to that manager. Well, it's the same as tapping up. In the rules of football, the rules of football are quite simple. You have to wait until the manager is out of a job before you can approach him to offer him another job, and anything else was considered. It would just make you wonder how managers find out there's a vacancy. But technically, what Tom Joseph is talking about there is that it is illegal. It's not illegal, but it's frowned on in the world of football. But assuming that we know it happens, Kieran, how does it happen?
Well, there is a difference between a manager's contract and a player's registration certificate. when a player joins a football club, he or she will sign a contract for a fixed period of time. And that means that we've just seen Olivia Smith join Arsenal, for example, world record fee. We've seen Waymo about to sign for Manchester United, with Sumi signing a 5-year contract. And what that means is that the signing club has exclusivity over the ability to use that player's services for the fixed term of the contract. And if you want to say, well, we'd like to sign that player, what you have to do is to agree with the current club a compensation fee. You say, right, you're giving up 2 years worth of the player's registration. We're going to compensate you. And that's what we call that's what it's called a transfer. You're transferring the registration. With a manager, it's different. It's just a standard contract of employment, and it doesn't have to be registered as such with the football authorities. In theory, a manager could manage 2 clubs. It doesn't happen in practice, although I vaguely remember, didn't Sir Alex Ferguson have a contract where he was managing Scotland for a wee bit and a club as well? So yeah, we have seen complications. But when a manager signs a contract, that will have a long list of T's and C's, one of which will say that you are contractually obliged to stay at this club for 5 years, 6 years, whatever, however long the period of time is. And if you want to be released from that contract, you have to serve gardening leave. If somebody wants to buy out that gardening leave, this is the buyout figure. So if we take the case of Graham Potter, for example, when he was at Brighton, he'd signed a 6-year contract. It still had 4 years remaining. And Todd Bowley phones up Brighton and says, we would really like to talk to Graham Potter. And Brighton said, well, you're entitled to talk to him if you want, but according to the terms and conditions of his contract, if you want to release him early, he either has to wait 12 months before he joins Chelsea, or you pay us £22 million in compensation and we will waive the gardening leave. And we've seen that. We saw something similar with Thomas Frank. We saw Postecoglou when he went from Celtic to Spurs. So it is now a common feature. So it gives the clubs some protection. It also gives the manager a degree of protection should they be sacked. We've seen quite a few managers join a club, be dismissed with a period of their contract remaining, and they've effectively sat out. They've been paid to not go to work. Although when we talk to some of our friends who are sports lawyers, they will say the manager has an obligation to apply for jobs to mitigate the amount of gardening leave that they get paid. But some of them, I think it's fair to say, do it a bit half-heartedly because the rewards are so generous during that period of time that there's not a huge benefit to them in terms of actually getting a job.
There's a couple of things off the back of that, Kieran. First of all, you think if any manager would have looked forward to gardening leave, it'd be one called Potter. I mean, the local newspaper headlines would have been loving that. There he is, pottering in the garden. We tend to see the idea of gardening leave applied very rarely, as you say, to managers now. But we do see it a lot when, like, technical directors of clubs are being shifted around. They tend to use gardening leave. But it's a strange phenomenon because it's kind of implying that, yes, we really want your services, but not enough to pay a large amount of money. So we'll have your services in a year's time, which is a strange indication. But also, this one of those questions I like is I spotted something, and I know what our listeners like, that they'll have their hands up now going, oh, Mr. Peevely, Mr. Peevely, sir. So if a club owns a player's registration, have you been playing the guitar before we?
If only. It's the spring on my desk microphone.
Oh, of course. Because you like to do that edgy standing up recording thing, don't you?
Yes.
Only because more people can see the bookshelf then with your books. No. So if a manager has a contract of employment, a player is registered for the club. So what happens with a player manager then? Are there two separate pieces of paper then? One for his registration as a player and one for his contract with employment as a manager?
I think potentially yes, because you could be sacked as manager and still retain your position as a player.
Right. Okay. And just apropos Olivia Smith, I thought it was very interesting. A couple of journalists suggesting this weekend, Kieran, that she's a very good player, potentially very good. She's got an unusually long contract for a woman player, 4 years, I believe. But they're all arguing she's not, if you compare her to other players, she's not worth £1 million. But what they're saying is this is Arsenal's planting a flag on top of the hill saying, from now on, this is what you've got to pay to compete with us. So it's more of a statement than an actual economic necessity, if you see what I mean, in order to retain or to obtain her services.
Yeah, I think you can argue about transfer fees all day long. She's clearly a very talented player. Arsenal have just won the Champions League. So whilst they are not flush with cash, they have certainly had a benefit from that. And I think they've wanted to therefore say to not just the other clubs in the WSL, but also other clubs in Europe, we genuinely want to be contenders going forwards. Chelsea have been the most successful women's team in recent years and deservedly show that they've certainly invested more money than other clubs. And I'm not going to go down the valuation rabbit hole. But if you take a look at the total sum of all of the transfers added together and the squad cost, Chelsea are still some way ahead. I think Arsenal are genuine in terms of wanting to be competitive. The movement to the Emirates Stadium for home matches, I think it's fair to say, has been a fantastic success and therefore has helped to generate additional revenues, and that's money which is going back into the kitty as far as the ability to recruit is concerned. So yes, I mean that they could have probably arranged that for 950 grand, but the amount of interest that it has generated has been quite spectacular. I mean, I did an interview with Elle magazine. That's Elle with beginning with an E rather than beginning with an L. Last week, and I think it's fascinating that we are now in a position where women's football is part of the everyday discussion and culture on a broader level. And that's got to be encouraged.
I'm taking it as a compliment, Kieran, that you think I'm so masculine I won't be aware of what Elle magazine.
No. Well, some of our listeners, we've got a broad palette of listeners.
We do indeed. I'd be interested. You just raised two more issues. I'd be interested to know, Kieran, because Arsenal playing all their games at the Emirates next season. I'd be interested to know, and I'm sure they could find this out by a survey, how many of the people who go to Arsenal women's games are also Arsenal fans. Because I suspect that a lot of them will be people that are new to football and have been attracted by the fact that it's a different environment. Because it's noticeable looking at the crowds watching the England-Sweden game the other night, for example, and the Italy-Norway game. It's noticeable how much younger the demographic of the crowd is. And I'm not saying they're kids, they're not, but the amount of people you see in their mid-20s, a lot of them men as well, it's very different. The age is very different to the men's game. So it strikes me, as we've said before, as we said at that seminar recently, it's in 10 years' time when those people are a little bit older and have got children of their own that you should start to be judging the success of women's football rather than now, because it seems to me that it's a completely different audience. Also, we mentioned Trevor Francis being the first £1 million male transfer last week, or as Brian Clough tried to claim, 999,000. And one of our listeners got in touch, who was a journalist at the time, saying he was in the room for that press conference when Trevor Francis signed, which is amazing. And then ruined it a little bit by saying, couldn't take my eyes off Mrs. Francis. She said all the journalists were totally distracted by the fact that Trevor Francis was married to the most beautiful woman in the world. It's like, okay, I was at the start of. I was there when we declared war on Germany, I just couldn't take my eyes off Neville Chamberlain's tie. What a dapper man. Sorry. You put your hand up, Kieran, which I appreciate greatly.
No, what I was going to say, I absolutely agree with that first point. And I think this is a further indication, and this is a topic which we'll probably be discussing on Thursday's show, that many young people feel that they've been priced out of men's football.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there is a different demographic, and that does raise separate issues, such as given that you're going to have a greater proportion of women going to women's football, that gives us a separate issue as far as things like toilets are concerned.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the Emirates Stadium was built in the anticipation of, let's say, 85% of people attending are going to be men, or they will have done a calculation, and that won't be the same for women's football. And we are now starting to see a few clubs in the WSL planning to have separate stadiums for the women's team if they feel, for example, I think Manchester City are aiming to that. They feel, well, we don't think we'll be getting 60,000 for the women's team, but if we build a bespoke stadium let's say in the region of, say, 12, 15, 20,000, we believe that we can fit that, then we've got to go and fit it out accordingly for the target audience and a younger audience, a more sort of gender equal audience in terms of those people attending. These are the things which have to be taken into consideration at this stage. Otherwise, there'll be complications a little bit later.
Well, also, you assume it might be and I realise we've got slightly off the original point of the first question here, but also women's football is probably going to be a safer environment for non-binary football fans, for example. Also for younger people who have audio-sensitive issues. So, again, when the new women's stadiums are built, money's going to have to be spent on providing facilities for those people as well. But that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. I mean, as part of the problem with somewhere like Selhurst Park, which was built between 1925 and 1968, didn't occur to them for a minute that anybody with a wheelchair or without a penis would be going to a football game. Consequently, the queues for the women's toilet and the after are just ludicrous.
Yes.
In fact, it's one of the things that cheers us up at halftime when it's so packed is watching American tourists finding themselves in a queue, and after half an hour, they find themselves at the door to the ladies' toilet rather than the bar because it's so confusing as to which queue's which. But it's and shame on those people who use that penalty shootout as an excuse to slam women's football in general. Just don't watch it. If you hate it, don't watch it, basically. Daniel Pete has our next question. An interesting one. Again, Daniel says, when Kylian Mbappe moved to Real Madrid, I found it strange that his deal had a contract worth £12 million a year in wages after tax, says Daniel, and then he would also get an £85 million signing on fee, but this would be spread over the length of his contract. So this got me thinking that if the bonus is paid over the length of the contract, why not just combine the bonus with the wages? Does dividing it this way help with FFP or amortization? And are there tax benefits for either the player or Madrid in splitting it this way?
Right. Under La Liga's wage cap rules, there are potential benefits because the signing on fee might not be deemed to be part of the player's wage, and therefore can be dealt with in a different manner. My understanding is that when a club wants to register a player with La Liga, what you have to do, you work out your expected revenue, less any loan repayments in the next 12 months, less any overheads, and whatever you've got left over is deemed to be your wage limit. So therefore, there could be potential benefits. And also, we're talking about the signing on fee going to Kylian Mbappe. I suspect that signing on fee is going to an image rights company or a management company, and therefore would not be deemed to be part of the wages. So it's a way of shifting the cost base. Furthermore, there could be players at Real Madrid who have step-up contracts, which is along the lines of, if somebody is signed by Real Madrid who is on a bigger wage than me, I get an automatic step-up so that I match their wages.
Okay.
Certainly, I've seen this before at some English clubs, which remember your favourite story involving a player's mum getting a large amount of money.
Wow.
For being a youth scout. I had heard a story that there were two other players at that particular club that if somebody came in on more wages than them, because I think one was the senior pro, one was the captain, or something like this. I don't know how true it was. It's one of these things that does the rounds, that they would have an automatic pay rise to match that particular player's wage.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
New Vitamin Water Zero Sugar Pineapple Passion Fruit is packed with vitamins. Just like the amount of peas we packed in that sentence. It's packed like your tote bag. The one you stole from your ex. Or your overpriced half a studio apartment. Or extra rushed rush hour traffic. Packed like your calendar. Triple booked at 5, of course. Grab a Vitamin Water. Did we mention it's packed with vitamins?
Do you know what, Kieran? That story, I mean, it's only from 5 years ago, but it seems to come from a kinder, gentler, more innocent time.
Yes.
Than just when you just had a club pretending that a player's mum was running the academy. You think, we've only got 5 questions today, Kieran, and that's partly because this question could take us the whole week to answer, really. I'm not entirely sure there's any way of coming up with a short answer to this question. It comes from Pete Couchman. And I don't know whether I know Pete Couchman or whether subconsciously Pete Couchman just sounds like he should have been a music producer in the 80s. So I just got that sort of Pete Couchman here with his new all-girl combo. And basically, Pete Couchman asks a question that is very much in the top 10 of questions that we get asked when people sidle up to us in bars or trains. Harder to sidle in a train, I know, but yeah. Basically, the championship, I think, has probably been the league we've mentioned more than any other since our very first podcast. And Pete Couchman says, what possible solutions do you see in terms of funding changes in the championship to restore competitive balance? The relegated teams are basically streets ahead in terms of money. The teams that try and compete, to quote 50%, get rich or die trying. By the way, was that a phone call you took earlier? Or?
Yes, it was.
Oh,
yes.
okay, because I thought it was bad enough you playing the guitar without you trying out your DJ set. Again, I don't know where we start with this question, Kieran, because we've talked about it. No one's got the answer to it. I don't think those people who are optimistically assuming that the regulator will have the answer to it are wrong. I'm guessing. So how do you do it apart from trying to persuade, as Pete implies at the end, apart from trying to persuade those owners of championship clubs not to get rich or die trying, like Rotherham's approach has been, for example. How do you prevent this? I really don't know what the answer is.
Well, I think the first thing you have to do, and I've been asked to put together various models and various spreadsheets and bits and pieces over quite a long period of time. And the first thing that I say to anybody that asks me to do something is, first of all, how did you get my telephone number? Quickly followed by, what is your objective?
Yeah.
What is fairness? Because some of the models that I've seen discussed reduce the imbalance in the championship, but increase the imbalances in the Premier League. So if you're saying, well, I want a more competitive championship, but an even less competitive Premier League, given that the Premier League is the driving force of interest in football as far as the global media, as far as the domestic media is concerned, that seems counterintuitive. Although it could equally be argued that actually the media are only interested in half a dozen clubs, and therefore allowing them to go even further ahead in terms of the revenue advantages that they have is what the media secretly want, even though they can't be seen to admitting to it. So there are various ways that you can do it. You could substantially reduce parachute payments. Looking at the figures that I have in front of me, so I did an analysis, so it's on my spreadsheet. In 23-24, on average, a parachute payments club had £63 million more in revenue than a non-parachute player club. It had weekly wages of £32,000 compared to an average weekly wage of £12,500 for a non-parachute club. So there are substantial advantages. They tended to buy more players. They certainly had much more expensive squads, but they also lost more money.
Yeah.
So I think this is a valid issue, Daniel. But my big reservation is that if you just try to solve the championship, you're creating a ripple effect elsewhere in football. And unless somebody, I don't like using this word, unless you take a holistic approach to the finances of the game and come to a consensus as to this is what we deem to be broadly fair, and you can have 1,000 different definitions of fair, and then work to that particular objective. And if you work to that objective, there will be significant winners and there will be significant losers. Then it's actually very difficult. I've thought about the utilisation of wage caps, but I actually discussed this with a chief executive of a well-known club, to which their reply was, how can we be expected to sign a player on 60 grand a week in the Premier League on a 4 or a 5 year deal, and we're not one of those clubs that are guaranteed. Yeah, Spurs and Manchester United had bad seasons last year, and yes, they finished towards the arse end of the Premier League. But they were still 15, 20 points above getting relegated. So it was a false flag to say that they had a chance of going down. If you're not one of those clubs and you say, we'll sign you for 60 grand a week, but if we get relegated, it has to go down to the average of the championship, so we'll pay you 12 to 14. The player doesn't sign and we get relegated. And we can't recruit, and that's not good for the Premier League itself. So it's a genuine tricky one. I don't think there's any chance of a collective approach. It's not a franchise competition, and also those clubs which have driven the success of the Premier League, the likes of Manchester United and Chelsea and Liverpool and so on, Arsenal, and these clubs which have become global brands in their own right, there's a very good case for saying that they should be entitled to generate a lot more revenue and keep more of their revenue than other clubs. And that is reflected in the distribution in the Premier League itself. So it's a bit of a cop-out, Daniel. I mean, I could write a research paper on this for 15 or 20,000 words. I saw, this isn't a party political comment, I saw Nigel Farage being interviewed by Laura Kuenssberg yesterday, to which the vast majority of his answer is, I haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
And that's where my position would be. It's fairness, a bit like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder.
Oh, I bet she was happy interviewing Nigel Farage, wasn't she? Didn't even have to pretend there's any balance there. It's unusual. I have to apologise to Pete, because it's normally me that gets people's names wrong. Kieran's very good at them, even though he hasn't got a script and I have. He was so excited about the Kylian Mbappe question. I find it's interesting, this discussion, Kieran. You talk about the reducing and competitiveness in the Premier League. I suspect that if you were to ask every football fan in the country, bar Bournemouth, Brighton, Palace, Brentford, and a couple of others, if they would want to see more turnover of clubs coming into the Premier League, the answer would be yes.
Yeah.
The clubs that don't want that to happen, it's like, I really don't want the free promoted clubs from the Championship to get relegated. But if my club's at danger of being one of the clubs that is relegated, then I want all three of them to go straight down. Of course I do. if I supported a team in League Two, I'd much rather see 3 new teams in the Premier League every season. It makes it more interesting. The big story already, Kieran, in the Championship this season, particularly from Skies, is Birmingham Wrexham. And there are a lot of journalists suggesting that existing Championship teams are going to be panicking with Birmingham Wrexham going in the Championship and possibly being contenders. Is that the case, do you think? Or do you think that the different FFP rules in the Championship will make it harder for Birmingham and Wrexham to not buy their way up the leagues as they have done, but do you think it will make it harder for them? Have they reached a ceiling for the moment, do you think?
No, I don't think that is the case, because if you take a look at Wrexham's revenue in League Two, because that's the season for which we have the most recent accounts, it was not only a record for League Two, it was 3 times the record.
Wow.
They will have similarly have a fantastic season financially in terms of revenue generation in League One. I think we've got a fascinating season in the Championship this year because only 4 teams are in receipt of parachute payments. So therefore,
yeah, of course,
because we've had that bounce back effect. As a consequence of that, I suspect that both Birmingham and Wrexham will have perhaps top 8, possibly even top 6 budgets, even though there are some clubs which you and I as fans think of as big clubs. We've got the 2 Sheffield clubs, we've got Borough, we've got Derby and so on, who generate big crowds. Certainly St Andrews will be sold out every match next season. There's a real feel-good factor in Birmingham. Wrexham have a smaller ground, but they have the globalisation issue. But Wrexham generate 50% of their revenue from the overseas market, which is unheard of for a lower league club. It's an incredible achievement. So that will give them a financial advantage. So I think it's going to be a very, very exciting Championship. And all bets are off as to who will go up, because if you take a look at the clubs that have come down, I think it's fair to say that Leicester City have issues. They've got an outstanding hangover in terms of charges from the Premier League. There is a chance, and we'll have to await their 2025 accounts, there is a chance that they could be subsequently charged by the EFL for a breach of the PSR rules. We're starting to talk football here, which is not really our thing. I think Ipswich are in a very strong position. We're not a cynical show, but if I was a cynic, I would say, well, did they partly budget for a promotion drive in 25-26 when they recruited those players in 24-25, and so on. So I think it'll be if I was the owner of a Championship football club, and it's easy for me to say because I'm not the person who's having to write out a cheque for 150 to 200,000 pounds a week as a minimum, possibly double that. I'd be going, this could be our season. I don't think clubs have a better chance than for a very long time.
I have to say that new Birmingham City home kit, chef's kiss, lovely. They've been with that sponsor for quite some time as well, haven't they, Birmingham? That's interesting. A penultimate question comes from Sam Duran. Apologies if I've mispronounced that, Sam. But Sam says, because FFP is only judged over 3 years, a massive windfall presumably only helps the team for 3 years. Is there a mechanism for teams to effectively amortise income? Good question.
Yes, there is a way, but there's sort of a way here. Whilst you'd be limited to 3 years, Sam, what we do know is that because 100% of the profit is taken in a single financial year, utilisation of the 30th of June can give you effectively an extra year of benefit if you're not in an FFP or PSR. Probably when you wrote this question, Sam, it was called FFP, but we got round to answering it now, PSR. Let's say that you're in a strong PSR position and you've got interest from another club to sign one of your players. Delaying the sale until the 1st of July means that if we take Brighton selling João Pedro to Chelsea, Brighton didn't have a PSR position problem. They delayed it till the start of July. So therefore, they're covered now for 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28. Whereas if they'd sold him on the 30th of June, they would have got one less year. So I think clubs are using their financial year end as an accelerator or a brake in terms of, yes, it's going to be covered in 3 years, but which 3 years? Now, there's one other issue that you might be able to put into play, and that's the increasing use of add-ons. I saw a report in the last couple of weeks which said that 10 years ago, add-on fees were probably in the region, I think it was 8% of the total value of transfer fees. And it's now add-ons are 20 to 25%. Now, if I'm clever and I'm thinking about this from a spreading my FFP benefits, what it could be, you could have an add-on to say that if the player, it's a 30 million signing, but if the player plays 100 games, which would probably take them at least 3 years, then you get an extra £10 million or an extra 15 million, and that goes into years 4 and 5 of the contract. So there's a way of utilising the use of transfer add-ons to give clubs a benefit, if that's the route they want to go down.
Our final question, Kieran, comes from Simon Heaney. It's an indication, again, we've been doing this 6 years. We still haven't got to the bottom of options on transfer contracts. You'd think it would have taken us a year to cover every single angle. But yes. No, we're still getting questions and they're still completely valid. And it's about Wealdstone FC, who I discovered recently, Kieran, the first ever live football match on the BBC after the Second World War, for some reason, was Barnet versus Wealdstone.
Oh, right.
In 1946 or 47, I believe. I presume because Barnet was quite close to Alexandra Palace, where the studios were at that time. And apparently, the game kicked off a bit late because they had to lug cameras across an allotment, which they didn't know was there. And then it got dark earlier than they thought, so they had to not show the second half because there was no proper floodlights. But It's a fascinating story, but it's one that I learnt from the bloke in the pub, so how correct it is, I don't know. But Simon says, my club, Wealdstone FC in the National League, signed a player recently on a 1-year deal with an option for a second. So how do these types of contracts work? As in, what does the club have to do to activate the option? And also, if exercised, does the option automatically roll into year 2? Or is it a one-time use only? Or is it negotiable?
Right, Simon. What tends to be the case is that if you have an option, there will be, again, it comes down to T's and C's, but quite often, first of all, there will be a notice date. So that if you want a player to re-sign for you, it could be that the club has to trigger the option by the 31st of March or the 28th of February. And that gives the player notice that you shouldn't be therefore instructing your representatives, instructing your agents, or making discreet inquiries about finding a new contract for next season because that's already been dealt with. It could also be the case that instead of an option for a second year, that there is an obligation for a second year. And again, this would be triggered by what we refer to as an obligating event. An obligating event is a particular achievement. So it could be a striker. If you score 15 goals, you get an automatic second year contract. If you're picked for the first team on 20 occasions, you get an automatic second year contract and so on. So it is very much on a contract by contract basis. As far as does it automatically roll into year 2? No, it will be the terms of the contract. Now you could have a separate clause, which will be a repeat clause, but there's no obligation for that to be the case.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love, starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom. you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Not all meals are created equal. For instance, breakfast has the spicy egg McMuffin for a limited time, and lunch doesn't. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I know we've discussed this before, Kieran, but again, I'm happy to remind people and new listeners particularly, because it's something that does interest them. Is there still a position at a football club called club secretary, which there used to be, who I assume in the old days would be the person across all this sort of thing? But it seems to me now that if you've got 24 players in the Premier League squad, all of whom will have vastly different contract options with various complicated clauses to trigger, who's across this? Whose job is it in the club to make sure that everything that happens to a player's contract happens when it should happen at the right time? Well, we saw last year a couple of occasions in one of the lower leagues where there's a couple of FA Cup ties were wiped out because players' registrations were slightly incorrect. Who's across this?
In theory, that's the job of the club secretary.
It's
right.
that
individual's responsibility to ensure that the club is compliant, A, with the rules and regulations of the competition, and secondly, in terms of individual contracts with staff members. Now, it could be that they then say, we've got a junior legal advisor or a senior legal advisor who does this on a regular basis. But from a personal point of view, I would do this. I'd set up a spreadsheet.
Of course you would.
And I would have trigger dates and trigger appearances, and I would have gone through the contracts, because the chances are that there'll only be one or two triggers per player that you need to be focusing on. And also that would apply to add-on fees, as we were talking about add-ons a little bit earlier, because there was that famous player who joined, I say he's famous, I've forgotten his name, of course, who joined Leeds United from Derby County, and he had
Seth
Johnson.
Yeah.
Seth Johnson. And I think he got to 49 appearances or 99 appearances for Leeds, and the manager wanted to pick him, and somebody more senior said, you're not going to pick him because it's going to cost us an extra 250 grand.
Yeah, which was money they needed for the goldfish at the time.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Kieran, you'd have a spreadsheet for the morning tea run, wouldn't you? Basically.
If I drank tea, it probably
yeah, black 2 coffees, oat milk, no sugar. Thanks to everyone who's joined the Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join the club, you don't drink tea either, don't you? It's another of your peccadillos. If you'd like to join the club too and get every episode a day earlier than everyone else, ad-free listening, and invite to our monthly Q&A sessions, bonus episodes and more, then go to our website, priceoffootball.com. Because it's going out tomorrow, isn't it? Because our next Q&A is tonight. But it's already happened. Damn. But you can get this week's bonus episode if you sign that, because we're doing a bonus questions episode this week with more topical questions. So priceoffootball.com if you want to become a member of the Price of Football Club. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, X, and find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy one of our books or a Price of Football t-shirt, you can find all the details on that same website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Thursday with our news episode, which is already jammed with some quite depressing news, I'm afraid. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, as always, to everybody that listens to the show. And being part of the Price of Football Club is great fun.
Yeah,
we have a great time with the live shows and the quizzes and so on. And it does allow me to go into further wormholes of investigation on questions which are less than 9 months old. Which is great, but it costs money, and we've all got tight budgets as present. So there's an alternative. If you want to give us a bit of support without going down the financial route, give us a review. It genuinely makes a difference. It's part of the algorithm and the metrics which are used by the likes of Spotify and Apple, and it genuinely does help us. Doesn't matter what you say on the review. You could even say you would rather have the show presented by Alvin Stardust and Neil Warnock, and I couldn't wait for that.
I wouldn't be the one to call Neil Warnock my cuckoo. The reason I'm laughing is that you did an impeccable Alvin Stardust leather glove impersonation. See, this is the sort of thing. If you sign up for the Price of Football Club, you'll get this live visually on the Q&A. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.